Do you know what 3 elders of Jehovah's Witnesses can ask a 26-year-old woman about her marriage bed behind a closed door? I do. I will tell you tonight. But first, I need to tell you why she has no answer. I was born in this religion, baptized at 13, married at 18 on October 14th, 2017, to a ministerial servant everyone called exemplary. Disfellowshipped 4 months ago, in mid-December of 2025, after 3 men in a windowless back room of the Mansfield North Kingdom Hall asked me 5 questions about what had and had not happened in my marriage. They had a clipboard on their lap. On that clipboard was a typed questionnaire taken from a manual called Shepherd the Flock of God, a book I was never allowed to open as a bride. That is the part people on the outside do not understand. In this religion, wives are kept deliberately ignorant of what is expected of them, and then, 8 years later, they are audited against the standard they were never shown. The ignorance is the setup. The interrogation is the delivery. I lost my mother, my father, my brother, my niece and nephew, and my 8 years inside a procedure that had been typed before I was born. If you have ever been asked a question you were not permitted to prepare an answer to, stay with me through this one. Subscribe so the next woman who needs this story finds it in her feed. Leave a comment, not as a favor to me, but so another woman scrolling at 3 in the morning knows she is not alone in the back room. I am not speaking into a camera tonight. I am speaking into your ear. Come sit with me. The room had no windows. That is the first thing I want you to know. The back room of the Mansfield North Kingdom Hall, where 3 elders sit for a judicial committee, is a rectangular room with fluorescent lights that hum a note about a half step below a piano's middle C. Gray industrial carpet that smells faintly of vacuum powder. 1 rectangular table, 4 folding chairs, and a box of Kleenex pre-placed on the table, always, before the sister walks in. I walked in at 6:58 on a Tuesday evening in November of 2025. I was 26. I had been married for 8 years. I had been baptized at 13. I was about to be disfellowshipped, though nobody in that room said the word yet. We all knew. There were 3 men on the other side of the table. Brother Thompson, 68, the presiding overseer, soft-spoken, paternal voice. Brother Weaver, 54, the service overseer, already holding a pen over a fresh page in a small notebook, never looking at me once through the whole meeting. And Brother Kessler, 47, the youngest of the 3, my husband Daniel's best friend since they were both appointed ministerial servants in the same month 10 years earlier. He should have recused himself. He did not. No one in that procedure required him to. Brother Thompson had a clipboard on his lap, a standard brown masonite clipboard with a yellow legal pad clipped to it. I could not see the top of the page from where I was sitting, but I could see that the page was not blank. There was something typed on it, rows of something. I know now what was on that page. I did not know then. I will tell you in a minute. He said, "Sister Hoffman, we are going to ask you some questions about the physical intimacy of your marriage. I want you to understand this is a spiritual matter. Please answer honestly." His voice was the same voice he used when he welcomed new publishers at the Sunday meeting. Gentle, paternal, almost shy about it. Then he asked the first question. He said, "Did you always fulfill your marital due?" I want to step out of that room for 1 moment and take you somewhere else first, because you will not understand why I sat there in silence for a full 7 seconds before I answered, unless I take you to the morning of October 14th, 2017, the morning of my wedding. I was 18. My mother was braiding my hair in the bathroom of our house in Mansfield, Ohio. The house smelled like it always smelled. Avon hand cream, Watchtower magazine paper, the specific dryness of a home where no candles are lit because candles are worldly, and dinner is eaten without music because music is a distraction from spiritual matters. My mother had been a pioneer for 30 years. Her hands were thin and practiced and careful. She braided my hair the way she had braided it for 30 years of Kingdom Hall mornings. Only this time, she did it in silence. Not a cold silence, a ceremonial one. When she finished, she set a worn pink hardcover book on the bathroom counter next to my hairbrush. The Secret of Family Happiness. A Watchtower publication from 1996, pink cover going brown at the corners, a yellow post-it marking Chapter 5, A Wife Who Builds a Happy Family. She looked at me in the mirror. She said 7 words. Be submissive. He is your head now. Then she walked out of the bathroom and closed the door behind her. That was my preparation. That was the total of my preparation, at 18, for 8 years of an obligation I did not even have a word for yet, with a man I had known socially for 10 chaperoned months, after a courtship where we had never been allowed to be alone in a room together. There are women who were given less than I was. I know that. I have read their letters. I am telling you mine because mine is the one I can account for. 8 years later, in that windowless back room, Brother Thompson sat with a clipboard on his lap and waited for me to answer whether I had always fulfilled my marital due. And I want you to hold both rooms in your mind at the same time. The bathroom on October 14th, 2017, with 7 words of instruction and a pink book on the counter. The back room in November of 2025, with a typed questionnaire on a clipboard and a box of tissues already on the table. The first room made the second room possible. The system that sent me into marriage with 7 words is the same system that, 8 years later, needed me to account in detail for everything I did not know. I did not know, sitting in that chair in November, what was typed on Thompson's clipboard. I want to tell you what I found out later. It was a questionnaire, pages of it typed, taken from a manual called Shepherd the Flock of God. The Shepherd Book is the elder's private handbook, a confidential document that members of the congregation are never shown, never allowed to read, never supposed to know exists. Elders sign for their copy. They are instructed to keep it locked away. A wife is not permitted to open her husband's copy, even if she is married to an elder. Some men who have left the organization have leaked scans of it online. That is how, later, I saw the pages of the manual that had been written about me before I ever walked into that room. The Shepherd Book has chapters on disfellowshipping procedure, on judicial hearings, on what questions to ask in what category of alleged sin. There is a chapter on marital matters. There are sample questions. They are the questions Brother Thompson asked me, nearly verbatim. I want you to understand what that means. Those 3 men were not improvising. They were not uncomfortable religious laymen fumbling through a difficult conversation. They were auditing my intimate life against a printed checklist. Their questions were typed. Their evaluation rubric was typed. Their categorical options for me, privately reproved, disfellowshipped, were typed. I was a line item. And the manual that defined the audit was the same manual I had never been allowed to read as a bride. That is the first mechanism I want to name. The organization keeps brides deliberately ignorant and then audits them against a standard they were never shown. 8 years of marriage is the interval in which the ignorance ripens into the offense. You are sent in with nothing. You are brought back to account with everything. The second mechanism is the doctrine of headship. I grew up inside this doctrine. My father was a ministerial servant, my mother taught Bible studies for 30 years, and I understood from the age of 4 that the husband is the head of the wife, as Christ is the head of the congregation. The Watchtower publications repeat this sentence, with small variations, until it becomes the air in the house you live in. A wife who does not submit is a wife who is in rebellion against Jehovah himself. Her marriage bed is not private. Her body is not private. Her willingness is a spiritual indicator. The specific scripture the organization builds the marital due on is 1 Corinthians 7, verse 3. Paul, writing to the Corinthians, The verse in Older English says the husband is to render to the wife the benevolence owed her, and likewise the wife to the husband. Benevolence. The Watchtower glosses that word as sexual availability. A wife who is not available is withholding benevolence. Withholding benevolence is a form of rebellion, and rebellion, eventually, is a judicial matter. The third mechanism is the two-witness rule, and this is the piece that will make you feel sick if you have not heard it named before. In the organization, any serious accusation of sin normally requires 2 witnesses for the elders to take action. If one sister reports that a man in the congregation sexually assaulted her, there must be a second witness, or the elders will not proceed. That is the rule that protected abusers for decades. It is documented in the Australian Royal Commission findings on this religion. But for the question of whether a wife was sufficiently available to her husband inside her own marriage, 2 witnesses are not required. Her own confession, extracted under pressure in a windowless back room, is enough. The elders can proceed on her yes. The elders can proceed on her no. The 2-witness rule that shields an abuser from consequence will not shield a 26-year-old woman from being disfellowshipped for the answer she gives to Brother Thompson's question about her marriage bed. Let me step out of the explanation for a moment. A lot of you have written to me over the past months asking if there is a way to help me keep doing this. I left a support page in the first comment of this video. That is where it is, right at the top. What you give helps me keep recording, helps me keep the lights on, helps me keep saying these things out loud for the women who are still in that windowless room. If it's not your moment, that's all right too. Let me take you back to that night. Brother Thompson asked me 5 questions that night. I told you the first one. Did you always fulfill your marital due? I sat in that chair and I said the word no. Just the word. I watched Weaver's pen move. The pen had a chewed plastic cap. I remember noticing that. I remember thinking how carefully he was writing, how careful all 3 of them were. They were following a procedure. The second question was whether my husband had ever had to ask me more than once. Thompson used the phrase, had to ask, as though asking were a burden laid on my husband by my inadequacy. I said yes. Weaver wrote that down also. The third question was whether, during the last year of my marriage, Daniel and I had engaged in, and here Thompson paused, glanced down at a typed list I could not read from my side of the table, and used a phrase I had never heard spoken before. Acts not appropriate to the marriage bed. He waited. He did not tell me what that phrase meant. He wanted me to tell him. He wanted me to either confess to a specific act I could not even name, or to deny it with the appropriate wifely offense, performing an ignorance I was supposed to have been born with. I said, I don't know what you mean. Nobody ever told me what is appropriate. Thompson looked at me for a long moment. Then he said, You should pray about that, sister. The fourth question was about frequency. How many times in the last year had I initiated intimacy? Initiated. That was his word. I said I did not know. That was true. Daniel was the one who had kept those records, in a small notebook in the drawer of his nightstand that I was not allowed to open. The evidence that could not now be produced was, apparently, my fault also. The fifth question is the one that still wakes me at night, 4 months later, alone in my apartment in Columbus. Brother Thompson took a breath and he said, Sister Hoffman, do you believe that your failure to fulfill your role as a wife has contributed to the spiritual weakness of this marriage? That was when I saw the machine. I will try to explain what I saw, because it is the thing I most want you to see. I had walked into that room believing I was the defendant in a marital dispute. I was not. My husband was not even in the room. My husband was home, or at the Kingdom Hall, or at his mother's, somewhere else, innocent, spoken of by these 3 men in the respectful tones reserved for an exemplary brother. What was on trial in that room was not a marriage. It was a woman's answerability to an institutional rubric for female availability. Daniel was not a party to that proceeding. Daniel was a reference document in it. I was the line item. And then I saw something else at almost the same moment. Brother Kessler was my husband's best friend. He had stood next to Daniel at the wedding on October 14th, 2017. He had been to my kitchen for dinner 11 times across 8 years. His wife and I had pushed a stroller side by side at the Saturday ministry. He should have recused himself from this committee the minute my name was submitted to the elder body. He did not. No one required him to. The same procedure that allowed 3 men to ask about the intimate failures of a marriage also allowed my husband's best friend to sit in judgment over me for those failures. That is when the room tilted. Not literally. I did not cry. I did not stand up yet. But something in me that had been standing for 26 years sat down. I said, "I don't have any more answers for you." Thompson said, "We will deliberate. We will call you in 3 days." I said, "I know what you will decide." I stood up. I picked up my purse from the chair beside me. I did not take a tissue from the box they had pre-placed for me. I did not look at Kessler when I walked past him. I walked down the hallway past the small stage, past the literature cart with the stacked watchtower and Awake magazines, out the front door of the Kingdom Hall, across the parking lot to my car. I sat in my car for a long time with my hands on the steering wheel. I did not cry there either. That came later. 3 days later, the call came, the way Thompson had said it would. The following Sunday, they announced from the stage the single sentence that ends a life in this religion. Sarah Hoffman is no longer one of Jehovah's Witnesses. That is the whole announcement. Just that sentence, and then the next item on the meeting program. Nobody in that hall was surprised. Everybody had been prepared. It was the last audit, and it was perfectly clean. I have been out 4 months now. I live alone in a 1-bedroom apartment in Columbus, Ohio, about an hour and a quarter from Mansfield. I moved here the first week of January, not because I had family here, but because I needed to get away from the concentration of witnesses in the town I grew up in, where I could not walk into a grocery store without seeing someone who had known me since the day I was baptized. I see a therapist twice a week. She is not a witness. She does not know any of the words. I have to explain marital due and headship and judicial committee the way you would explain a dead language to someone who has never heard it spoken. The explanation itself has become part of the rebuilding. When you have to put the system into words for somebody who has never heard of it, you notice how much of it you accepted without ever being told what it was called. I read a lot now. Books Daniel would have taken away from me. Books my mother would have thrown in the trash. I read slowly because I am teaching myself to have opinions about what I read, which turns out to be a surprisingly difficult skill to acquire at 26. I read in the used oak chair I bought for $12 from a thrift store, and when I disagree with a book, I close it for a few days and think about why. That was not a practice I was trained in. Megan drives into Columbus about once a month. She brings sourdough from the bakery in Mansfield where we used to work side by side. She does not ask me how I am doing in the voice people use when they already know the answer they want. She asks because she wants to know. It still surprises me every time she does it. My brother Michael has not spoken to me since September. Not a phone call, not a text. He is an elder now in the same congregation where I was disfellowshipped. He is raising 2 small children inside the same religion I was raised in. I think about that every time I think about him, which is most days, which is too many days to count. I cut my hair last month, just to my shoulders, nothing drastic. But for 26 years it had never been cut past my shoulder blades, and I wanted to see what the bottom of my ears looked like. I had never seen them on myself as an adult. They look fine. They look like mine. I do not have Brother Thompson's clipboard. It was never mine to take. It sat on his lap for an hour in November, and I never touched it. But I want to tell you something, and this is the part I did not understand at first. I have been carrying that clipboard for 5 months, every time I could not sleep, every time my throat closed in the dairy aisle of a grocery store for no reason I could name, every time I caught my reflection in a window at dusk and did not recognize the shape of my own shoulders. I was carrying the clipboard. The clipboard is an object. What the clipboard represents is a standard. I was raised to pass an audit I was never given the textbook for, and I failed it in a back room in November, and the failure became who I am, to the only people who had ever loved me. I was 26. No, I had just turned 26 the week before the committee met. Nobody in my family marked the birthday. Nobody was going to. I had spent my whole life preparing for an examination I was never allowed to study for. A woman wrote to me last month. She told me her own judicial committee had asked her the same 5 questions in 2019. Word for word, she said she had never told another human being what those questions were, because she had been so ashamed of the answers. She said that hearing someone else name them out loud had cracked something in her that had been fused shut for 6 years. That is the reason I keep doing this. I am telling this story for the women who cannot yet, because they are still in the room. If you grew up in a world where your silence about what happened in your own body was called your submission, where a man with a clipboard could ask you what you did in the marriage bed and call it spiritual shepherding, where the ignorance you were handed as a bride became the evidence that disqualified you as a wife, I see you. I was in that room too. The room can be walked out of. It will not feel like freedom on the day you walk out. It will feel like your knees have forgotten how to hold you. But the knees come back. If you stayed with me all the way through this one, thank you. The support link is in the first comment, if anything in this story reached you. Freedom hurts less than obedience. I promise you that.